Hello and welcome to the Sanctuary, a safe space to speak from the heart. I'm your host, Israel, and I'm so excited. Like, whenever I talk to storytellers, I know it's going to be a cool conversation. Um, Communication strategist, storyteller, podcast host of the Lead with Storytelling podcast. My friend and brother, Sochi Azuh, thanks for coming to the Sanctuary today.
Oh, Israel, this is it's great to be here, and you got me excited as well when you started expressing your own excitement. It's always a joy, a privilege, an honor to speak with fellow storytellers.
Yeah, I mean, I think what was your storytelling origin story? When did it start for you?
um, we might say when I was born. Yeah, I think that's the short answer. But yeah, origin stories as origin stories go. The original origin stories go. Started from the womb. Um, listening to my mother. My mom was she is the OG. So I grew up in Nigeria, right? And Nigeria, as Nigerians would know, have this blessing called epileptic power supply. And we had this, we had this many nights when there would be this blackout in the
Mm,
neighborhood, and we didn't have phones, we didn't have social media. um so my mom would kind of innovate. She would see us wondering what next to do. We would maybe have neighbors who couldn't come out to play. We would be maybe huddled together outside our door, under the starry night, night sky, and just we're maybe clueless. And she would say, "Hey, have you heard about? Heard this story about the tortoise and the goat, the he goat?" And we were like, "What do you mean? What story is that?" And then she would start, and she would say, "You know what? Just to get us in the mood, I have this special recipe for white porridge." And we've never tasted that white porridge. And she would go into the kitchen, whip up some meal. We would start eating, and then she would then tell us this story to go with the accompany the meal.
mm.
And that memory has stuck in my head. That maybe that was, loving and cherishing moments when you can connect with people, connect with family with a story, might have been my origin. I think I'll just put that here on this on this podcast, for the records, that that is my origin story.
No, so you know what you mentioned when you were just giving a random example of a story that your mom might tell, and it had tortoise inside, and I'm like, that's my own experience too. And I've always wondered why is it that tortoise is always like he's always in all these stories, man. Like whether he's the villain, whether he's the hero, he's always somehow like the
Yeah,
tortoise is always in this story.
this that's a great point you make, because I tell people, there was a point when by the time I had already started, making these videos, sharing my passion for reading and storytelling on YouTube. I always try to pinpoint, or pick out fantasy as my go-to. And this question you raised was one of the reasons why fantasy was my go or is my go-to genre. The reason is that myths, folklore, fantastical stories, they have a peculiar magic, right? A peculiar system for breaking down truths into very simple, into simple elements that are digestible, easily digestible by anybody and everybody. You will no sooner believe a story about the tortoise and make you wonder, just, transform, transport you to a plane of wonders and awe than when you sit down with a brochure of a very sophisticated trying to digest facts about or features about a sophisticated gadget. So
mm,
I've always wondered, and this has been what, over decades of coming online, talk about, have conversations with people, reading papers, academic papers, books about myths, meaning making, and I am still in awe that we hold those stories, we revere those stories more than you do those thick how to DIY books that assume that they can teach you more about navigating life and its tumults than these simple folklores.
no, you know what? I'm an advocate of that, and like, don't get me wrong. I love data, I love stats, I love
Yeah.
numbers, all that stuff. But I think just as human beings, what's the best way to put this? We resonate more with story and storytelling versus facts. That's why, and you know what? There are some people that use story for negative reasons,
Yeah.
because of how powerful it is. Because someone will come and tell you this is the fact, and this is why this, and this person will come and tell you a story about, let me tell you a story. And all the facts just fly away. So story is so, so powerful. And I think as like, people that love telling stories, as storytellers, we have to wield our power in a positive and careful way also. So I'm curious, like, realizing the power of story, what are some, I guess, guardrails that you use when you want to tell stories?
Hmm. Emotion. um Emotion is a big part, but there is more or less, academically speaking, there is it's a there's a kind of it's a tripartite um framework for you know building a or telling a story that will an effective story. So let's start with the first one, logic. Oh no, let's not start with logic, let's end with logic. Let's start with empathy. Empathy, if it has empathy, if it's able to make people connect, or connect with people, resonate with people. Then the second is authenticity. If you are being authentic now, and then the last is logic. And the reason why I made logic last is because logic is usually the common thread, whether or not you're using storytelling as a tool. Because everybody believes that if I'm being logical with you, if I use facts, something that makes sense,
Mm,
then I should be able to get through to you, but not always so. However, in case where you're using storytelling as a tool, logic comes into play or plays out differently. Now,
mm,
I recognize that these three elements are more or less a mirror to, or a mirror of Aristotle's three tenets of storytelling, which include ethos, pathos, and logos. For ethos, he's particular about the the emotions that you bring to play, how you wield emotive elements in your stories to move people, because he recognizes that people can only be moved when they feel invested in the journey, right? In case of pathos, it has to do with the values, where you need to embed values that people can align with. And in this case, it's matched with authenticity, because you trying to be yourself are actually an embodiment of certain values and the people who hear you and get on board with what your the message you're trying to deliver are people who recognize those values as one or two that they too hold dearly and want to align with.
Mm-hmm.
Then the way that I said, and then in terms of logos or logic, in the way that it plays differently when you're using storytelling as a tool, is that you need to recognize there should be a system. There should be a system, not one that is out of this world necessarily. Even when you use, if you're trying to build a world or an atmosphere or setting for your stories that may be otherworldly, it should still have a system because people need to be able to connect dots. And that's, just the way human beings are.
Mm.
We are always looking for making patterns, connecting dots, trying to figure out, fill gaps where there are none, or where there may be one. That's just the way we are. So don't underestimate, or try to don't insult your audience by thinking that you could just dream up some outlandish system or world in which you're situating your story or setting your story, and think that they will just go along with it. No, they need to be able to make sense of everything that you are saying. Your ending should align or should be a logical conclusion in a sense, um, of to your beginning. So I think using these three, I've always used these three as my go-to when I'm thinking about stories that I'm writing or stories that I'm telling or even speeches that I'm writing or even or demonstrating or performing rather.
Mm. Mm, mm, mm. Empathy. Why is it important to make your audience feel something?
Because that is who we are. You just think about the decisions you've made when you're buying something in the grocery store, or even in maybe a luxury, what's it called, mat, where you're trying to get a girlfriend a gift, or think about even in conversations that we're maybe this kind of conversation that we're having right now. You are fueled by this drive. And remember, you set the tone of this conversation in the beginning by trying to express your excitement. That's an emotion that people connect with. It's the way we are. The only way I can connect with someone, you can imagine if I'm expressionless throughout this conversation without lighting my eyes, no light in my eyes, no smile on my face, you will begin to wonder, there's something wrong. Am I saying something wrong? Am I boring? Am I not connecting? Am I pissing you off? You know, it's just the way we are. We look for those cues. We look for those micro expressions that tell us that you're feeling something, because that is the only way I can tell if I'm connecting with you or
Mm,
if there is something that I can connect with in you. It's just the way the human beings are. I could go into all the talks about how your what's called in neuroscience supports, or studies in neuroscience supports this, that when you are talking with someone at the point where you're talking with them, a part of the brain that lights up is mirrored. It's a mirror of the part of your own brain that also lights up when you're having that interaction, because we're
mm.
connecting. It is just the way human beings are built.
Hmm. Okay, let's rewind. So, your mom is telling you these stories. Of course, you grew up with that. Did you take any like formal education or training for like communication, storytelling in any way?
So, well, with me or for me, my particular path or story arc has or career arc has actually taken that road. Um, I grew up on stories. I grew up on books, novels. I read a lot of them. I wrote some. I hung out with people who, shared this passion with me, and I built a community around me, a community of storytellers around me, um, and when the time came for me to figure out what to study in university,
Mm.
I remember having this conversation with my father, and I told him, "Oh, well, he asked me, what do you want to study?" And I said, "I want to be a doctor." And he laughed. Nigerian father would say, no, 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 no. You don't have it in you. You don't have it in you. You know what? You know what? I'll help you make up your mind. You're going to go study economics." Like, okay, you're the
Mm.
man paying the bills. No problem. So I studied economics. I studied economics in school. I don't know how I did it or how it happened, but I did. I graduated successfully. Um, I wasn't much of an economist. I hung out more around the English and Literary Studies department in my school than I did in my class or my faculty. I was the first economics, non-English and literary student to contribute to the English and Literary Studies journal in the school. That was where my passion lay. I wrote drama scripts for my church a fellowship in school. So no, I didn't have a formal education in that. However, when I had a turn in my career.
Mm.
My professional career started in a bank where I worked with the human resources department in the bank. So I was a human resource generalist for well on 5 years or so. And every friend of mine that I spoke with, when I told them, "Hey, this is what I'm doing now," they were always like, "What? We thought
Mm.
you'd be like
Yeah.
we thought you'd maybe be like one of those eccentric writers, holed up in one cabin or something, writing books and all that." So I had a point in my career when I made a decision to go back to school and do the thing. And if I needed to do a master's, I would do it do a master's in an area that, even if I did not have a job, maybe in a bank, this was
Mm.
something that I could train myself to, make a living, but something that had to align with my passion. So
Mm.
I did a master's in media and communication, where I did a deep dive into all and every aspect of communications, brand strategy, storytelling, and I was so pleased. I think this was maybe the best decision I'd made on my own since university, my first degree.
Mm.
Um, so that was my story. I had the choice, and I think I had the privilege of, choosing exactly what I wanted to study, what I
Mm.
wanted to be trained on or trained in, and making sure that it aligned with storytelling, it aligned with communications. And I've been also privileged to work in advertising agencies, work with advertising agencies, work in brand departments in banks, in different industries, using storytelling as a tool, and and thereby having enough opportunity to actually see it work, learn what
Mm.
works and what doesn't, and kind of afford myself the luxury of a 5 to 9 life, where I can continue to talk about storytelling and how it can best serve brands, and how it can best serve people, whether or not you consider yourself as a brand, but even as an individual human being, how storytelling can help you understand your identity, understand your life, understand navigate life, and what's going on around you.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's amazing. I mean, deciding to go back to school, like, was that an easy decision for you?
No, no, it was an organic decision because um, I needed to figure out what was next for me, and at that point, after 5 years in the bank, and it was I made that decision with my wife. So it's easier. It would be easier if you were single to make that kind of decision. Yeah, but when you have
Yeah.
someone you are, responsible for, or accountable to, or you are partnered with in life, you need to be able to convince them. Um, I didn't have that problem with convincing my wife. She always knew this was like a natural, like I said, very organic. It's a natural
Mm.
next step for me, and it made sense. If I wanted to pay someone to teach me something, I would want you to teach me something that I could use to fish for myself.
Right. Yeah, no, I love that. But you mentioned knowing, as a Nigerian myself, knowing the industries there, you worked in some of the, so it's like oil companies, banks, advertising agencies, and you did work in two of them. So you were doing pretty cool for yourself and your family. What was behind the decision of moving to Canada?
Kids, um,
Ah,
kids. But again, I still, I don't know. I think it's never truly a simple answer. Why you leave somewhere you maybe you're doing so well in. And you're right. I was doing very well. I had aspired to climb the corporate ladder, and I think I got to the top. I was I headed corporate communications departments, marketing departments, led different marketing campaigns that I'm proud of. I can look back on for lessons and for validation. And, I found all that. And then, choosing to pack it up and move to a different climb, and having to start again as it were. It's never truly a simple decision, but I'd hate to round it up to just one decision. So I think there may be several decisions, but one of the top decision was really the kids. The decision to find an environment that we could really bring these children up, in values that we wanted to teach them without, complications of security concerns, or concerns about the infrastructure that supports your well-being. Those are not easy decisions to make. But I guess on another level, you also I think this is also an extension of infrastructural concerns. You know, as a storyteller and one that hopes aspires to really hone this craft, and really try and do a lot more with it as well. You need infrastructure that will support you, and struggling in an environment that you don't have a consistent power supply, steady consistent power supply, or you don't have legal systems that support or protect IP as such.
mm,
You don't have, and you probably don't have a community, maybe supporting community um, of like-minded people. So you think you want to do things the right way. Where would you really flourish? Would you
mm.
flourish in a place where people don't think like you? Um, then I have friends who taunt me and say you ran away because you couldn't find where to buy books. Um, uh, uh, but I could buy books. I bought books. Yes, I did buy books. But I find that, when you are where you're closer to, let me say, the source of many of the great the source of great stories that being told, or publishing houses that look to storytellers to continue to drive those conversations, really helps and is
Mm,
quite enticing. So again, it's not just one thing. Um, if we were in a hurry in a bus, or we met somewhere and I knew you were in a hurry you're rushing off somewhere, and you asked me that question, I would say, yeah, it was the kids.
it was the
Um,
kids. It was the kids. Something you mentioned a few times is community, and I'm curious, what does it mean to you, and also how do you build your community?
Community building, I think it's central, right? It's really important, and when I say community, you need community of people who think like you, who support you, or who aspire to the same goals that you two aspire to. Um, so my community is built up, or made up of colleagues in the communication space, in core of storytelling craft, and I'm talking about content creators, talk about writers, talk about coaches, trainers, talk about um, learning development professionals, all of these people, and also by extension, marketing professionals, PR specialists, people who rely on storytelling as a tool to
Mm,
actually get their work done. And some people that you may not think fall into this circle, might be community leaders, might be corporate leaders, because they too actually rely on trainings in storytelling for them to actually make impact, whether to amplify the
mm.
impact that they are making, or to articulate their messaging, their vision, and ensure that people connect with them and connect with their visions and their values, in order for them to um, get the work done.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah. No, I love
yeah.
that you said that. I love that you said that. Yeah.
So it's keeping it involves reaching out to people, right? It involves engaging those people. So you're either maybe pushing out content that people can continue to be reminded about, and have those messages reinforced. Putting out updates, putting out, like we're doing right now, having these conversations and sharing these conversations with people. You find people who connect with those messages, connect with these conversations, whether the first time, and maybe even the second time, when they feel that that first time needs to be reinforced. The
Mhm.
third time, when they feel like this is something, a platform that I need to engage with. And then maybe the fifth time, when they feel like, yeah, Israel is an expert in this. I need to continue following him to hear more about these subject areas. So that's really how the community has grown with me, or around me, and continues to. And I feel like it's now becoming a responsibility, and I know you understand that it becomes that responsibility that you carry on your shoulder to continue to spread the word and advocate.
Mm. Mm. The other thing that really stood out for me was when you're saying that, community leaders and like corporate leaders need this. And I'm like, yeah, I totally agree with you because when you think about it, messaging is everything, right? Like you can see, like you feel passionate about the thing and you understand the thing and you know what it is, but with the wrong messaging, someone with a crappy product will get all the, because their messaging is way better. So yeah, yeah, that's what really, that one was like, yes, yes, yeah, I
Yeah,
agree
I
with
think
that.
I think I want to let me give you your flowers, right? Let me give you your flowers, because um, it's hard. It's hard, especially when you're starting out, or you do something once. You could feel discouraged, right? When you hear crickets after the first time you've pushed the message out. But you've been in this game for a while now, and you've had these conversations, and you continue to hold these conversations regardless of, you're not exactly looking at the metrics, you're not looking at numbers, you're driven by something deeper, right? And that's not easy. And I think it's the same experience that community leaders, as you said, they have. They are driven not by, hey, I'm looking for X, looking to make XYZ, $10, $10,000 or anything. They are driven by something more intrinsic,
Mm-hmm.
more, something deeper than all this.
Yeah.
And if that is your motivation, then you know already that it's a long game. It's not just something that you do once and forget if you're not getting a pat on the back the first
Mm.
time round. Um, it's Having said that, you need to focus on the people, the first 100 people, the first 10 people, those people who connect with you, that help you to spread the word. Because if you don't tell the story, somebody else is going to tell it for you.
Mm.
And trust me,
Mm.
you don't want somebody else to tell your own story. So you can't rest on your oars when you feel like you told it once, and you're hoping that the algorithm maybe will do the work for you. It doesn't work that way.
Mhm.
Somebody else, in telling your own story, right, will get it wrong. You need to learn how to tell your story yourself. Tell that story authentically, with empathy, so that the people hear from you first before somebody else does that for you, and it never really goes
Mm.
goes the way you plan.
Yeah, owning your story, owning your IP, that's something that's really, really important. Like, talking about that, let's talk about lead with storytelling. How did that come about? Actually, I love that title, man. Like titles are dear to my heart. And like I struggle with writing any if I don't have the title that just feels right to me, I'm not even gonna do anything. And I'm so envious of people that can write or do anything before the title comes. I'm so envious of them. I'm not in that level. So
Uh,
lead with storytelling, amazing title. I gotta say, how did that come about? How did he come up with that title? And how did he decide to start lead with storytelling as your podcast?
No, but I'm curious as well. I mean, how did you come up with the sanctuary? Because when I think of the sanctuary, when I first heard sanctuary, I was thinking of this cozy area where we could sit down, with headphones and the mic, and we're chilling with a warm cup of coffee or something, and having these very heartfelt conversations. How did you come up with that name?
Yeah, I love the word actually. I just love the word itself, sanctuary, and it has featured in some of the things I've done. So when COVID happened and I had to go online to start podcasting, the name just came to me because to me it was like this place where it's not like an escape, but it's a safe place for people to talk
Yeah.
about whatever. And because I was now given a wider reach than my city, I was like, okay, you are coming to this place where you can talk about anything. There won't be any judgment there, and it's just like sanctuary. So years ago, one of my favorite Disney films is The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And the sanctuary, like, so when Esmeralda is getting killed or about to die by this bad guy, Quasimodo the hunchback now steals takes her to the church, and then it's like sanctuary, sanctuary. So that's like my early intro to the word sanctuary, and it's just stuck with me. So once I was like, okay, you're in this place where no bad thing can happen to you. That's what the sanctuary is to me, at least. And like I said, it's featured in some of the things I've done, and definitely now is a podcast I'm running.
Okay. When you made reference to that Disney animation, Hunchback of Notre Dame, I was thinking of the live, and actually I thought again. I thought at that moment about the live animation, live no, not live, the live feature, the live version, which and it's a is a high school high rom com, um, called Halfback of Notre Dame.
Oh, I've not seen that. I've not
Check it
seen that.
if you can, if you try and look for it. It's oh my god, it's you know. But anyway, that was right by the way. For lead with storytelling, when I started out, I didn't have a name. I didn't have a name for the podcast. In fact, I didn't even know it was a podcast I was doing. Just like you, around this was around COVID. We were, at home, bored at home, and we were like, I had these friends, like I said, at my community, friends who were also communication specialists or marketing managers. And, I would call them and just ask questions about, what do you think what's going on right now? How are you, addressing these challenges? What can I learn from you? What new campaigns are you thinking around? What insights are you working with? That's how it started. So you would find that the early episodes of my podcast were a little bit sketchy, the very informal, having, just get a friend on a call, Zoom call, and they would come in and they would be, hawking or coughing and be like, yeah, 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 what, let's do this,
Yeah.
I never deleted those videos because no, not because I want to embarrass my friends, but because they are reminders. They're reminders of how these things start,
Mm,
and also reminders for myself that start with what you have, start where you are. Don't wait till you have the big gadgets. Wait till you have tech. You know, but the name didn't come to me till much later, and this it came. The insight I had was, first of all, I needed to make something central to this podcast. So the idea of this podcast, and what was it? Very easily, I thought of books because by the time I had started these conversations, I had maybe pushed out about 5 or maybe 10 videos of me reviewing books. So I thought maybe books, but it wasn't really about the books, right? It's to me, I thought, no, it's not. We don't exactly talk about books on this podcast or these conversations. So what is it? And it took a while for me to sit with that question before I could identify a common thread, which was storytelling. And this storytelling enabled me to explain the core themes in all the conversations I was having, whether with photographers, filmmakers, marketing executives, with writers or script writers, film producers.
mm.
It was storytelling. So w- I have storytelling. Let me hold on to this. So what about storytelling? And I thought about, what do you want people to take out of the conversations? And it took a while, but I think I had a few iterations of that title, but I think at the end I was happy with the conclusion, which was to lead with storytelling, to teach people how to lead with storytelling. So cutting out the toe, and you're left with lead with storytelling podcast. So over
Mm.
time, it's resonated with people. If I tell people what this podcast is about, I've got the feedback that that is so you. It's this is who you are, and it's helped to warm up leads when you're looking out for people, you're trying to invite people to come on your podcast. And yeah, I'm happy with it. At least so far.
No, I love it. And I guess now you're one of those people that I envy because if it was me, I wouldn't have even started it if I didn't have a title. So yeah, I mean, kudos to starting and like figuring out and building. And you're right. One of the things about going back to old episodes is just to kind of see the progress that's been made, like, oh man, over time. And to me, it's about repetition, right? You gotta do it over and over and over again. And by the time you do it 10 times, oh shoot, I can change one thing. By the time you do it 20 times, by the time you do it 50 times, the difference between number one and 50 is gonna be night and day. So
Oh,
yeah, I'm
totally,
a keen fan of
totally. I mean, I think a lot of people start with, thinking about what's, you have the questions like, what's your inspiration? Or you're waiting for inspiration rather, waiting for inspiration to start something. But inspiration is overrated. When it hits, it's great, right? But inspiration shouldn't maybe meet you. I mean, I think it sucks to wait for inspiration to meet you while you're lying on your back. Action should lead before inspiration finds you. So for me, over the years, I look back on the quality of videos I've made. I laugh at the ones that I'd made before, some of my nuances, my tells, or feelers that I use, and see how I can laugh at those. But it's always encouraging, um, motivating to see how that look. It doesn't matter how you start; it matters how you grow. I don't want to say finish because never really finish, but you're always growing. So pick, see the things you're learning, try to do them better, and you can only do that when you start. Not wait for
Mm.
inspiration.
Yeah. So me, I tell people like, it's easier to turn the steering of the car if the car is already moving. So if you want to do the thing, you gotta at least move. Then you kind of
Move first.
figure out where you're driving the thing to.
If you haven't
And
copyrighted that analogy, I'm going to borrow it. I'm going to borrow it, please.
nobody's it's just true. And then the other thing again about inspiration, like, I mean, sure, whatever, inspiration comes, but to me, what I find is that you gotta walk first, then inspiration will just land on you somehow. And it always lands when you don't expect it. Like you
Yep.
can be driving in the shower, just like
Surprising
doing stuff.
places.
But if you're just like, I'm waiting for this thing, it's never gonna come. So
Yeah.
the best thing to do as a person that creates something, like, is to create something, and it doesn't even have to make
Yeah.
sense. But as they're building it, it will come. Anyway, I'm getting off my thing now. So you've given me your Saturday, Sochi. I appreciate this. I wanna let you go with this. Actually, so I'm gonna put two questions together. For you, why is storytelling important? And then for the audience, what are things they should look for if they want to embrace storytelling?
I think storytelling is the stories that we tell, and the stories. I'm going to put it in two ways. The stories that we tell ourselves are just as important as the stories that we tell others. Especially because it's the best way to articulate who you are and who you want to be. What was the second question?
For the audience, what do they need to do to embrace the power of storytelling? Or in your podcast title, what do they need to embrace to lead with storytelling?
Read more stories, listen to more stories, and tell more stories. I mean, it's maybe that if that is too simplistic, um, lean into the truth, right? Lean into the truth. Lean into the truth. And I say it's truth because the truth about who you are, regardless of who you are, if you are a community leader or a corporate leader, the truth should reside in what your vision and your mission is. If as an individual, you don't consider yourself a leader, to lean into the truth, is the same as asking yourself those very important questions of who are you, what do you stand for, and who aligns with those values that you hold dear. Those are the truths, and those truths, they come together to form the stories of who you are. And when we are gray and gone, the stories that are told are about the truths that you stood by, whether of yourself or of the truths that you stood up for in the world.
Wow. Of course, you had to end it with something profound. Thank you. Mind blown. I had a wonderful chat, Sochi. I think we have to do this again. I
Please.
thank you for all the awesome things you do. Thank you so much for the time, and thank you so much for coming to the sanctuary today.
Thank you, Israel. This was fun. I'm honored to have been here talking with you, and you made it so easy. Thanks a lot. It's very refreshing.